The call came at 4:47 in the morning. Not a phone call, not an alarm, just the sound of something tearing open in the dark, a low percussion that Marcus Webb felt in his sternum before he understood what it was. He was already sitting up in bed when the second sound came, louder, structural, the kind of noise a building makes when it stops being a building and becomes something else entirely. He was out the door in 11 seconds. He knew because he had counted once, years ago, during a training exercise that no longer had an official name attached to it, and the number had stayed with him the way certain numbers do. By the time he reached the parking lot of the Delwood Industrial Complex, the eastern loading bay was fully involved. Fire moved through the old warehouse, framing the way water moves through a channel it has carved before, fast and without hesitation. Following the path, the building had unknowingly prepared for it over 40 years of dry timber and accumulated grease and insulation that had never been replaced. Marcus did not stop at the perimeter. He went in. What happened in the next 11 minutes is a matter of record now, documented in a fire marshal's report that uses language specifically designed to describe events without assigning meaning to them. 3 workers recovered. 1 exit route created manually through a collapsed interior wall. 1 man carried. Burn injuries to both hands, palms, and the inner surface of the fingers, classified as second degree with localized areas of deeper involvement. Marcus Webb drove himself to the emergency room. He told the intake nurse he had touched something hot. That was 7 months before the morning he walked into the Crestwood Athletic Performance Center with his daughter beside him, and every person in that lobby turned to look at his hands. His name was Marcus Webb. He was 37 years old. He had a daughter named Iris, who was 8 and who wore her hair in 2 braids that she insisted on doing herself every morning regardless of outcome. He lived in a 2-bedroom apartment on the 4th floor of a building that had a broken elevator approximately 40% of the time, which Iris had decided to treat as a fitness opportunity rather than an inconvenience, a perspective Marcus had actively encouraged because it was the right perspective and also because he had no immediate means of changing the elevator. He had been a single father for 4 years. He had been a structural fire investigator for 9 years before that, employed by the federal agency that assigns people with particular combinations of engineering knowledge and physical capability to the task of understanding how fires start, how they move, and how to stop them from doing what they're trying to do. He had been good at it, not in the way that people who are good at things announce their competence, but in the way that produces results in circumstances where results are the only currency that matters. He no longer held that position. The hands were part of the reason. The full reason was more complicated, and he did not discuss it with people he had recently met. He did not discuss it much with people he had known for a long time either. It was a piece of his life that lived in a specific drawer, and he had made a deliberate decision about how often that drawer needed to be opened. What he had now was a contractor's certification, a working relationship with a regional construction safety firm that sent him 2 or 3 assessment jobs per month, and a daughter who had recently developed a serious interest in competitive gymnastics. The gymnastics was Iris's idea entirely. She had seen a video online 8 months ago, watched it 4 times in a row, and then walked into the kitchen where Marcus was making dinner and told him with the particular certainty of an 8-year-old who has already decided that she intended to do that. Marcus had looked at her for a moment. He had said that they would find a good program. She had nodded as if this outcome had never been in question. The Crestwood Athletic Performance Center was not the closest gymnastics facility to their apartment. It was not the least expensive one either. It was the one with the strongest junior competitive program in the region, the one with the coach whose name appeared most consistently in the results of under-10 regional meets. And Marcus had spent 3 evenings reading through program reviews and competition records before he called to schedule an evaluation appointment. He had also, because he was who he was, driven past the building twice to assess the exit configurations before he brought Iris inside. The lobby of the Crestwood Center on a Saturday morning in October had the particular energy of a place where ambition and parental anxiety exist in close proximity. There were perhaps 20 families in the waiting area, a mixture of small children in leotards and parents in weekend clothes carrying water bottles and gym bags with the focused expressions of people who had driven here with purpose. Marcus and Iris arrived 3 minutes before their scheduled time. Iris was wearing her leotard under her jacket, a decision she had made that morning with the same certainty she applied to most decisions. And she was carrying a small drawstring bag that contained her grip tape, a water bottle, and a stuffed blue jay she had named Captain that she brought to all new situations and then pretended she had not brought. The woman at the front desk looked up when they came through the door. Her eyes went to Marcus's hands before they went to his face. This was not unusual. It had been happening for 7 months. Ever since the bandaging came off and left behind what the dermatologist described clinically as hypertrophic scarring across the palmar surface of both hands, extending to the proximal phalanges. In plain language, the scars were visible. They were significant. They changed the texture and color of the skin across both palms and the inner length of each finger in a way that drew attention, the way unusual things draw attention, automatically and before the conscious mind has made any decision about it. Marcus had stopped noticing when people noticed. What he had not entirely stopped noticing was the category of reaction that followed. There were people who looked and then looked away quickly, embarrassed by their own looking. There were people who looked with open curiosity and then asked questions, which he preferred because it was honest. And there were people who looked with a particular expression that sat somewhere between discomfort and judgment, an expression that suggested the hands represented not something that had happened to him, but something about him. The woman at the desk produced the second expression briefly, before replacing it with a professional smile. Marcus gave his name and Iris's name and signed the evaluation forms without comment. They were directed to a row of seats near the observation window that looked into the main gymnasium floor. Iris sat down, put Captain in her lap in a way that suggested Captain was simply resting there coincidentally, and looked through the glass at the floor below with an expression of focused evaluation that Marcus recognized as the face she made when she was trying not to look as excited as she was. He sat beside her. He had brought a folder with Iris's basic health information and a notebook where he had written down questions he wanted to ask the coach about the program's approach to foundational training and injury prevention. He opened the notebook on his knee. The man who sat down 2 seats to his left 3 minutes later was named Derek Paulson. Marcus did not know this yet. What he knew was that the man was large through the shoulders, that his athletic wear was expensive in the particular way that athletic wear becomes when it is chosen to communicate something, and that he had arrived with a daughter of approximately the same age as Iris, who was introduced to the seat beside her father as Piper. Piper and Iris exchanged the careful mutual assessment of children who have been placed in proximity and are deciding what to do about it. Derek Paulson's wife sat on his other side. Her name was Renata, and she had the focused expression of a person managing a logistics operation with many moving parts. She was scrolling through something on her phone and saying things to Derek in a low voice that Marcus was not paying attention to until the volume changed. What happened was this. Iris had leaned across the empty seat between herself and Piper to ask a question about the competition floor. Something about the width of the balance beam, a question she had apparently been saving because she had researched regulation beam dimensions online and was comparing them to what she could see through the glass. Piper had answered with genuine interest. The two of them had moved closer to the observation window and were pointing at things. Derek Paulson leaned slightly forward to watch his daughter, and in doing so, turned far enough to bring Marcus's hands into his direct line of sight. The look lasted perhaps 2 seconds. Then Derek said something to his wife in a voice that he had calibrated for privacy but had not calibrated carefully enough. He said that he hoped the center was not dropping its standards. His wife made a quiet sound of acknowledgement without looking up from her phone. Derek added that some people didn't seem to understand that a place like this had a certain reputation to consider. The folder on Marcus's knee did not move. His posture did not change. He continued looking at the observation window, where Iris and Piper had progressed to a detailed discussion about something involving chalk. He said nothing. This was not because he lacked words. It was because he was 37 years old, and he had learned a particular thing about reactions, which was that the reactions worth having were the ones chosen deliberately, and the deliberate choice in this particular moment, in this particular lobby, with Iris 12 feet away, having the first genuinely unguarded conversation she'd had with another child in 3 weeks, was not to make a sound. On the other side of the lobby, a man Marcus had not noticed before stood near the water cooler with a paper cup and the unhurried posture of someone who had been in the building long enough to have formed opinions about it. His name was Robert Gaines. He was 64 years old. He had been a volunteer firefighter in Ridgecrest County for 21 years and had retired 2 years ago after his knees made the decision for him. He still came to the Crestwood Center every Saturday to watch his granddaughter's beginner session. Robert had not missed a single word of what Derek Paulson said. He looked at the man with the scarred hands across the lobby. He had seen hands like that before. He knew exactly what they meant. He knew the specific combination of heat exposure and contact duration that produced that particular pattern of scarring. Knew it the way a person who has been in burning buildings knows it, not from reading, but from proximity. From years of understanding the language that fire writes on the bodies of the people who go toward it instead of away. He did not say anything in that moment. He watched Marcus Webb sit quietly with his notebook and his folder and his complete and deliberate stillness, and he formed an opinion about him that had nothing to do with what his hands looked like. The evaluation appointment began 18 minutes later. The coach's name was Sandra Okafor. She was 51 years old and had been coaching competitive gymnastics for 22 years. She had coached 4 athletes to national junior championships and 1 to a collegiate program that had produced 3 All-Americans. She was not a warm person in the way that people mean when they describe warmth as a default setting. She was precise and honest, and she paid attention with the specific quality of attention that produces results in young athletes. She came into the waiting area to collect Iris personally, which Marcus had read was her standard practice for initial evaluations. She looked at Marcus when Iris introduced him. Her eyes went to his hands for a fraction of a second and then came directly back to his face and stayed there, which he noted. She told Iris to follow her and asked Marcus if he had questions before they began. He opened his notebook. He asked about the program's approach to foundational strength training for athletes in the 8 to 10 age range before introducing apparatus work. He asked about the center's protocol for managing training load during growth periods. He asked about the ratio of competitive preparation to technical development in the junior program curriculum. Sandra Okafor looked at him for a moment when he finished. She said that those were the right questions. He said that he had more if she had time after the evaluation. She said they would make time. Iris disappeared through the door into the gymnasium in the company of Coach Okafor and an assistant coach named Delia, and the waiting area returned to its ambient noise. Marcus sat back down in his chair. Derek Paulson had been watching the exchange from 2 seats away with an expression that had shifted slightly from its earlier configuration. Something had adjusted in his assessment, but not enough to produce any visible recalibration. He looked back at his phone. Marcus opened his notebook to a fresh page and wrote down 2 follow-up questions that Sandra's answers had generated. He was on his 3rd line of notes when someone sat down in the chair directly beside him. He looked up. It was Robert Gaines, the older man from across the lobby, the one with the paper cup and the unhurried posture. Robert looked at him directly, without the social preamble most people used when they sat beside a stranger. He said, plainly and without volume, that he had spent 21 years as a volunteer firefighter in Ridgecrest County and that he knew what hands looked like when a person had gone into something burning and come back out with other people. Marcus looked at him. Robert said he didn't know the story and wasn't asking for it. He said he just wanted the man to know that at least one person in this lobby understood exactly what he was looking at. Marcus was quiet for a moment. He said he appreciated that. Robert nodded once. He said his granddaughter was in the Tuesday group and that she had been at the center for 2 years and that Coach Okafor was the best he had seen at this kind of work. He said Marcus had made a good choice bringing his daughter here. He stood up, put the paper cup in the recycling bin against the wall, and went back to his chair across the lobby with the same unhurried posture he had arrived with. Marcus looked at his notebook for a moment. Then he wrote down one more question for Sandra. Then he looked through the observation window at the gymnasium floor. Through the glass, he could see Iris at the edge of the spring floor with the assistant coach. She was listening to an instruction with the focused attention she brought to things that mattered to her. Her braids were slightly uneven, the left one more so than the right, which was the standard outcome of her independent approach to the morning routine. Her gym bag was on the floor beside the coach's station with Captain visible at the top, positioned at a slight angle that suggested Captain was also observing. Marcus looked at his daughter for a long time through the glass. He thought about the fire marshal's report and its careful language. He thought about the third worker behind the wall and the 11 minutes and the moment when the situation had presented its requirements and he had answered them. He thought about 4 years of single parenthood and 2 years of reduced income and broken elevators and Iris researching balance beam dimensions at age 8 because she had decided to do something and wanted to understand it properly first. He thought that the sum of those things was not a problem. He thought that the sum of those things was in fact the exact life he was living, and that the life he was living contained, among other things, a daughter who was currently standing on the edge of a spring floor in a leotard she had worn under her jacket because she had already decided she belonged here. He thought that was enough. He thought it was more than enough. The evaluation lasted 40 minutes. When Iris came back through the door, her expression was the controlled version of something much larger, the face of a person who has received news they expected but are not yet ready to perform certainty about. She walked directly to Marcus and sat down beside him and said, in a voice pitched for only him, that Coach Okafor said she had natural spatial awareness and that her core engagement was already above average for her age group. Marcus said that was consistent with 4 years of insisting on carrying her own groceries up 4 flights of stairs. Iris considered this. She said she wanted to tell Captain. She retrieved Captain from her bag and provided the update quietly, in a tone that suggested she was delivering a briefing. Sandra Okafor came out 15 minutes later and sat in the chair across from Marcus with a clipboard. She went through the evaluation results with the same directness she had applied to his questions. She said that Iris had genuine aptitude and the kind of focused attention under instruction that was difficult to teach. She said the program would be a good fit if Marcus wanted to commit to the schedule requirements, which she outlined specifically. Marcus had already read the schedule on the center's website. He had mapped it against his work commitments and Iris's school calendar and the broken elevator's statistical impact on morning departure times. He said the schedule worked. Sandra nodded. She paused before she said the next thing. It was a specific kind of pause, the pause of a person deciding whether to add something that was not on the clipboard. She said that she noticed his hands during the evaluation. She said she was not asking him to explain them. She said that she had been coaching for 22 years and she had learned to look at the people sitting in her waiting room the same way she looked at her athletes, meaning she looked at what was actually there rather than at what was easiest to categorize. She said she did not know his story, but that she wanted him to know she was glad he was bringing his daughter to her program. Marcus looked at her for a moment. He said he appreciated that. She gave him the enrollment packet and stood up. As she passed the row of chairs, she paused briefly beside Derek Paulson and mentioned, in the same direct voice she used for everything, that the gentleman at the end of the row had asked the most substantive questions about child athletic development that she had encountered in an initial consultation in approximately 3 years, and that if Derek had questions about the junior program, Marcus might be a useful person to talk to. She went back through the door without waiting for a response. Derek Paulson looked at Marcus. Marcus was reading the enrollment packet. He was not performing the reading. He was actually reading it, notebook open, pen in hand, already writing down a question about the liability waiver language in Section 4. He had not looked up. The enrollment was finalized that afternoon. Iris started the following Tuesday. On the first Tuesday, Marcus sat in the parent observation area for the full 2-hour session with his notebook and a question he had saved for Sandra about the progression timeline for foundational vault work. He was the only parent who stayed for the full session. Most of the others had left after the first 20 minutes. Sandra came out at the end and sat down across from him. He asked his question. She answered it, asked one of her own, and they had a conversation that lasted 14 minutes about the specific mechanics of teaching spatial orientation to young athletes who had strong visual processing and weaker proprioceptive baseline, which was the category she had placed Iris in based on the evaluation. Marcus had 3 thoughts during this conversation. The first was that Sandra Okafor was very good at her job. The second was that Iris was going to be fine. The third was that the particular quality of being seen accurately by a person who was paying genuine attention was something he had not experienced in a professional context for a longer time than he had fully acknowledged. He said he would see her Thursday. She said she would be there. He went to pick up Iris from the changing room. She came out with her gym bag over one shoulder and captain under her arm, and the expression she wore when something had confirmed what she already believed. She said that the spring floor felt exactly like she thought it would. He said that was good information. She said that Piper Paulson was in the beginner group and that they had talked during the water break and that Piper's father had come over during the session and watched through the window and then come to find Marcus in the observation area and asked him a question about the program schedule. Marcus said he knew. Derek Paulson had found him in the observation area 20 minutes into the session. He had sat in the chair beside Marcus with the particular posture of a man who was carrying something he had decided to put down. He had said that he wanted to say something about what he had said in the waiting room on Saturday. He had said that he didn't know and that he should have, and that he was sorry. Marcus had looked at him for a moment. He had said that it was fine. Derek had said that it clearly wasn't fine and that he wasn't asking Marcus to pretend it was. Marcus had looked back through the observation window at Iris on the spring floor, executing a round-off sequence that was technically imperfect and absolutely committed. He had said that his daughter had just done her first real tumbling pass and that he was trying to watch it, and that Derek was welcome to sit down if he wanted to watch his daughter too. Derek had sat down. They had watched in silence for approximately 4 minutes. Then Piper had done something on the floor that made Derek lean forward involuntarily, and Marcus had said that her back layout had good height, and Derek had said he had no idea what that meant, and Marcus had explained it. And they had watched for another 6 minutes while Marcus provided a running commentary on what the assistant coach was working on with each of the 4 girls in the beginner group. At the end of the session, Derek had asked Marcus how he knew so much about gymnastics. Marcus had said that he had read approximately 11 hours of coaching methodology material over the course of the previous 2 weeks. Derek had looked at him. Marcus had said that when Iris decided to do something, he tried to understand it properly. Derek had nodded slowly, with the expression of a man revising something internal. He had said that he thought they would probably see each other Thursday. Marcus had said probably. In the car on the way home, Iris ate half a granola bar and told Marcus a detailed account of everything that had happened during the session. She described Piper as someone who was scared of the beam but didn't show it, which she said she had noticed because she recognized it. Marcus said that was a perceptive observation. Iris said that scared of something and not showing it was different from not being scared. He said that was true. She said that Coach Okafor had told her she was brave on the floor. Marcus said he was not surprised. Iris was quiet for a moment. She said that Coach Okafor had also seen his hands and asked her if her dad was okay. Marcus kept his eyes on the road. He said, "What did you tell her?" Iris said she told her that her dad's hands looked like that because he went into a fire to get people out and that they were the best hands she knew. The road ahead was straight and the evening light was flat and gold across the tops of the buildings on either side. Marcus did not say anything for a moment. Then he said that was exactly right. Iris said she knew. She put the second half of the granola bar in her bag for later and looked out the window. Captain sat on the dashboard at a slight angle, observing the city with the calm authority of someone who had been briefed and was satisfied with the information. One Saturday, 6 weeks into the program, Robert sat down beside Marcus in the observation area and said that his granddaughter Emma had asked him why Marcus's hands looked different. Marcus looked at him. Robert said he had told her that some people have marks on them from doing hard things, and that the marks meant the person had been somewhere difficult and come back, and that coming back with marks was better than not coming back at all. Marcus looked through the observation window at Iris on the balance beam, 4 feet off the floor, arms out, absolutely concentrated. He said that was a good answer. Robert said Emma had thought so too. They sat together in silence for a while, 2 men watching their daughters through glass, each carrying something the other understood without needing it to be explained. 3 months after that first Saturday, at the Junior Invitational of the indoor season, Iris Webb competed in the beginner division of the under-10 age group at a regional gymnastics center 40 minutes from their apartment. She placed 4th on floor, which was her best event, and 6th in the all-around, which was 2 places better than her seeding. Sandra Okafor stood at the edge of the competition floor during Iris's floor routine with her arms crossed and the expression she wore when something was happening the way she had assessed it would happen. Marcus sat in the parent section with his notebook, where he had been taking notes on every routine in Iris's division since the session began, not because any of it was required, but because it was how he understood things, carefully, completely, with the particular attention of someone who had learned that the difference between a good outcome and a bad one was almost always in the details that other people had decided not to look at closely. Derek Paulson sat 2 seats to his right. They had been at every Tuesday and Thursday session together for 3 months. They had developed the particular friendship that forms between people who have arrived at genuine respect through an inauspicious beginning, a friendship with substance to it because it had cost something to build. When Iris's floor routine ended, Derek was on his feet before most of the other parents in the section had registered that something worth standing for had happened. Marcus remained seated for exactly 2 seconds longer. Not because he was less moved, but because he was writing down one final note. Then he closed the notebook, placed it in his jacket pocket, and stood up. His hands, scarred across both palms and the inner length of every finger, came together in the particular way hands come together when a person is applauding with everything they have and do not care who is watching. Iris Webb, standing in the middle of the competition floor in her leotard with her 2 braids and the expression she wore when something confirmed what she had already believed, looked up into the parent section. She found him immediately, the way she always found him, without having to look very hard. She raised one hand and held up 4 fingers. 4th place. He held up 4 fingers back. She grinned, not the controlled version, the real one. The kind that 8-year-olds produce when they are standing in the place they have been trying to reach and the person who drove them there is watching from the seats above and every single thing about the morning is exactly what it was supposed to be. Sandra Okafor, standing at the edge of the floor, watched the exchange between the man in the parent section and the girl on the competition floor with the expression she reserved for the moments in this work that reminded her why she had chosen it. She had coached for 22 years. She had watched hundreds of athletes compete at dozens of facilities across 3 states. She had seen talent, and she had seen effort, and she had seen the particular combination of the two that occasionally produced something worth witnessing. What she had seen less often, and what she believed was the actual engine beneath every athlete she had coached who had gone further than the room expected, was this. A child who had been taught by the person who mattered most that showing up completely was the only standard worth holding. Iris Webb had learned that somewhere. Sandra looked at the man in the parent section with the scarred hands and the notebook and the four fingers raised and the expression that contained everything a person contains when they have given everything the situation required and the situation has answered back. She thought she had a reasonable idea of where. The drive home was quiet, in the way that drives home are quiet after something significant has been completed, and both people in the car understand that what happened does not require additional commentary to be real. Iris had Captain in her lap and her fourth-place ribbon folded carefully on top of her gym bag. She was looking out the window at the city moving past in the late morning light. Marcus drove. After a while, Iris said that she thought she could do better on the beam sequence in the second pass. He said, what would she change? She described a specific adjustment to her entry position that she had identified during the routine itself, something she had noticed in the moment and filed for later consideration. He said that Coach Okafor had noted the same thing in the debrief. Iris said she knew. She had listened. She was quiet again for a moment. She said that when she was on the floor during the routine and she looked up and found him in the seats, she had felt like she was not going to fall. He said that she wasn't going to fall. She said that she knew that too, but that it was different when she could see him. Marcus thought about Iris at 4 years old, 2 weeks after her mother left, and 3 weeks before he understood the full shape of what their life was going to look like from then on. She had been sitting at the kitchen table with a bowl of cereal and had told him with complete seriousness that she thought they were going to be okay. He had asked her why she thought that. She had said, because we have each other and also because I am good at cereal. He had laughed for the first time in 3 weeks. He thought about that now, in the car, with her beside him and the ribbon in her lap and Captain positioned on the dashboard with the authority of an advisor who had made the right call. She had been right at 4 years old. She was right now at 8. She would be right again in some future version of a car on some future version of a road in ways he could not yet see but did not need to. He just needed to be there when she was. The city moved past the windows. The light was the particular quality of late October light, flat and generous, the kind that makes familiar things look slightly more significant than they do on ordinary days. Marcus kept his hands on the wheel. Both of them, exactly as they were, exactly as they had always been. Carrying her and everything that mattered forward.